Good evening, everyone. I'll call this Committee of the Whole meeting to order here in Council Chambers at 6 p.m. I don't believe we have remote electronic attendance, correct?
Correct.
And there are two board appointments, Craig Logan to Revolving Loan Fund, and Matt Stoffen to the Human Rights Commission. Any questions on those? Thank you. And at this moment, I'd like to observe a moment of silence so that we can properly recognize someone who's given so much to the city, who passed away, I believe it was last week, Mr. Bob Ontiveros. Thank you for that. I think there probably aren't enough words to express our gratitude at the city for what he and his legacy have contributed. So thank you for doing that. Chief Galt, your presentation, letter of commendation to Lieutenant Nicholas Wade, Sergeant Daniel Beaudry, and Officer Kara Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to have the officers come into council chambers here. It's certainly my pleasure to have these officers in front of you today, Lieutenant Nicholas Wade, Sergeant Dan Beaudry, and Officer Kara Larson. Our staff every day goes out to protect the citizens of Moline and our visitors, as well as serve our community in a variety of different ways. And we see good work every day being done. And I think this was an important incident that occurred in Moline, that I wanted to bring these officers forward to you, in front of you tonight, to be recognized for some exemplary performance. And if you remember, back on December 10th, 2021, at about 4 p.m., the Moline Police Department received reports of a man with a gun at 16th Street and Avenue of the Cities. And I know all of you have traveled Avenue of the Cities and 16th Street on a regular basis, and you've been there on a Friday at 4 p.m. Has to be one of the busiest intersections, certainly in Moline, if not our Quad City area. And that was no different. These officers received a 911 call. It was dispatched to them that there was a male subject who was armed with a handgun near Rudy's Tacos. Sergeant Dan Beaudry happened to be in the area of the gas station when that call came out, and the reports that had come in said that the male had taken a position in the middle of the intersection at 16th Street and Avenue of the Cities and had fired a round of the gun in the air. Sergeant Dan Beaudry actually called that out on the radio and said that he was in proximity and had heard shots fired and that he was on scene. I'd also like to direct you back to that day and remember that it was overcast, cold, drizzling, making communications and response efforts very difficult. We don't work in perfect conditions, and these officers that night had to fight additional challenges of weather and traffic and darkness, making this an extraordinarily difficult incident to manage. Sergeant Beaudry and Officer Kara Larson were the two officers to arrive on scene first. Officer Larson also was responsible for a police officer in training, adding to her distraction and additional duties to making her job even more stressful. Sergeant Beaudry quickly took a position of cover with his squad car in the southeast corner of the intersection, and Officer Larson stopped in the 1500 block of Avenue of the Cities. And she began to immediately communicate with the male suspect, who by this time was holding the handgun under his chin. Officer Larson established a dialogue with the suspect while Sergeant Beaudry maintained cover on her and as well as the individual. Officer Larson was able to establish rapport with him, and she repeatedly pleaded with the suspect to drop the firearm and surrender to the police. Both officers maintained a very calm resolve and treated the suspect with dignity and respect. It was certainly notable on her body camera video that Officer Larson was fighting the elements as the time ticked away and she was becoming colder and colder and dealing with the rain and still trying to deal with the individual to make this a peaceful resolution. Lieutenant Nick Wade is the afternoon supervisor and commands the shift, and immediately responded to the area to begin to supervise the incident and direct responding units. And all of you know how busy that intersection is with various different businesses, including La Rancherita, that has a huge full glass set of windows there. Both Sergeant Beaudry and Lieutenant Wade recognized the need to start to evacuate the nearby businesses. It was there was a Moline basketball game that night, very popular place for people to go before the game, busy restaurant, and they started to get other officers to arrive in the area and start to evacuate incidents so that there would not be any innocent bystanders injured in the highly tense event. Lieutenant Wade created a small react team as well as an inner perimeter to prevent the flight of the individual and requested additional resources to include paramedics, the nearby agencies, a tactical team, and negotiators. He also facilitated the evacuation of all nearby businesses and the securing of the very busy intersection. The other thing that struck me is, Sergeant Beaudry there by himself early on, as well as Officer Larson responding right away, and people are just driving around him. He's there with a rifle and a squad car, and he's trying to deal with this individual, and people are just driving around him as he's trying to deal with this. So it was quite chaotic. Lieutenant Wade's overall scene management was nothing short of exemplary in a very chaotic and dangerous environment. After approximately 12 minutes, Officer Larson was able to convince the suspect to place the firearm on the ground. He was subsequently taken into custody without the use of physical force or injury to anyone, including innocent bystanders, responding officers, or himself. And each of these officers placed their own lives at risk to protect the lives of many innocent citizens who were in the area. Their efforts to peacefully resolve the situation was nothing short of heroic and exemplary. For their efforts, I am proud to award each one of them the department's formal letter of commendation. And so with that, we have a certificate with the nomination from Deputy Chief Brian Johnson, as well as my letter of commendation will also go into their personnel file for Officer Carol Larson. Sergeant Dan Beaudry. And Lieutenant Nick Beaudry. Just take a quick picture maybe with everyone and then thank you very much.
Yep.
Telephones.
We have Sean Foley or Craig Mack online.
Oh, I thought Craig Mack was.
Okay, great. Our next item of business.
Oh, they are on there?
There you go.
Next item of business is the update on the ADU ordinance from the Plan Commission. Mr. Mack, are you with us online?
Yes, I am online with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go
Good, thanks. Well, thank you for having me here. I'm the current chair of the Plan Commission. And back in December, Alderman went and Moyer met with us talking about goals that they had requested about 2 years ago, we'll say. And as with this pandemic thing, the commission was not meeting that often. So we said it would be our first priority would be the ADUs for this year. So we've been working on it. And I think you received a handout of our draft of what we are proposing right now. But this is just a draft. We had a meeting last Wednesday, a regular scheduled meeting, and the commission has really hung up on some ideas that we were challenging things. And we set up a subcommittee and to meet with Mr. Silverman, our counselor, Moline's counselor, to talk about some of these items. And today there was a meeting with Sean and with Charles and two of the Planning Commission members to review some things. And from that meeting, the big one is the definition of what a family is. And if you look on I think it's about the 4th page there, is what the current definition of the family is on the ordinances right now. And it is very outdated, as you can see, and it needs to be resolved because an ADU could affect what a family is defined as, a family member, excuse me. According to the meeting today, the city council is, city council, excuse me, the city comprehensive plan should be amended to make a reference to the ADUs before the ordinance is changed. Mr. Silverman stated that to the group, that the plan is the policy framework within which the ordinance needs to fit. So that has to be done first. And then we're taking this thing very seriously, these ADUs, because we think it's something that we really need for this community, but it needs to be done right. So Mr. Silverman said that he would have a reading back to us within 2 weeks. So hopefully once we have that reading, we can take it under advisement of what we can go proceed with on this ordinance. As a backup, once this ordinance is developed, we're also working on a tiny home ordinance, which kind of go hand in hand, but they really are 2 different items. So some of those things are more based on special usage, so it would get involved with the community members surrounding homeowners and that stuff, so they could have some say if they agree or not agree with having a tiny home near them. I'm down here in Florida right now, and there are a lot of communities that are being developed down here with tiny homes on small little lots, and it's very interesting. So I've been trying to research some of what they're doing for their ordinances, but so I could share with the commission when I get back. Any questions?
The questions from the council, Mr. Went?
Thank you. And thank you guys very much for working on this and getting back to us. A couple of quick questions. One, it said that, commission suggestion was to have a maximum of 600 square feet. But then the next line said something about getting rid of the 10% lot coverage language.
That's an item up for discussion right now. That was recommended by one of the commission members, saying they want to look at that.
Okay. I guess from my standpoint, my concern is I think the lot coverage area is probably a better way to go and probably have a higher maximum, because I mean we've got some lots in this town that are 1/10 of an acre, and then we've got, if you live on 4 or 5 acres, that might look very strange and odd that it's smaller than a garage, and so I guess from my standpoint, to have some of that flexibility in there, depending on what the lot size is, because having a standard, like I said, for 1/10 of an acre versus somebody who's got an acre or even 3/4 of an acre, those are very different developed lots in Moline.
Right. Okay.
We have another question from Alderman Waldron.
This is more of an operational insight or question. Typically, when we talk about water and sewer, the ordinance says that each, not attached, we're talking about unattached in the back, an ADU, has to have its own water and sewer service, especially if it has its own address, basically so you can shut off the water for these folks if they don't pay their bill. Have you guys taken that into regard, Craig, or have you corresponded with the other parts of the ordinance that are going to be affected by this, is my question.
As far as an ADU is concerned, the main property owner of the residence on the lot will be responsible for the utilities, the water, the sewer, and all that.
Okay.
The only thing we might have to do with a separate ADU is to provide a second address for this property. That might be like a half number, or it might be something. but the sewer and all utilities are going to be being paid by and the taxes also, excuse me, are being paid by the landowner, and they have to be living on the property with the ADU, with someone in the ADU.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, or?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Mr. Wynn?
Yeah, I had one more. On here, the rental inspections, it says all ADUs will be inspected and licensed the same as other properties with 2 dwelling units on the city of Moline. I don't have any problem with it. I'm hoping that we eventually get to the point where all rentals in the city, not just multi, but single family and everything is registered, and we make sure that they are at minimal standards of habitability. But is the intent on this, because if it's a duplex, both units of the duplex can be inspected under our current code. Would this be not only the ADU, but also the primary also fall under that inspection? Is that was that the intent? I mean, because technically the property owner can live in the big house or the small house, and so the other one could be the rental. I just was curious if you guys had a conversation that far into it.
No, we have not discussed that much farther on that, but I understand what you're saying.
Okay. It's just something we should look into. I have no problem with it. I think that it's a good thing. If you choose to have an ADU on your land and you're renting it out, then I think you should probably fall underneath those guidelines.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Mack. We appreciate you joining us today.
Well, we're looking forward to working with you on the new form-based code and also the new comprehensive code. So we're going to have a busy year this year.
Yep. Yes, you bet. Thank you.
Have a good meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
Chief, is there any public comment this evening? Okay. You'll note under questions on the agenda, we're pulling the first 2 items on the COW agenda for staff further research. Is what I understand.
For additional clarification.
There you go. All right, so we start at number 3, the Bluffs Art Installation Licensing Agreement. Mr. Vitas?
Sure, we received a request, Mayor and Council, from the Bluffs Neighborhood Association to be able to commission artists to paint artwork on the planters that are city-owned that are in the right-of-way. They submitted some draft artwork to share with you, but in terms of beautifying the neighborhood, drawing attention to the neighborhood. They've made this request and we're recommending approval.
Move to.
I heard a move to approve here by Mr. Schmidt, and
Second.
Alderman Wundt seconded it. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 4, service line material change 34-2111.
We've got a whole long list of items now for our utility director, Mr. Lodi, who's here with us tonight. This first item, and if I miss anything, Tony, please fill in the blanks. But the first item is a request to amend Chapter 34, that ordinance with respect to water and sewers of the Moline Code of Ordinances, Section 34.2.111 specifically. Service pipes, by repealing that section in its entirety and then enacting in lieu thereof a new section that would deal with the same subject matter. What it comes down to is based upon all of the efforts there are to remove the lead pipes and the iron pipes that are in the ground. Copper right now is one of the alternatives, but there is, in addition to copper, there's the ability to put in high density polyethylene pipe, which would be less expensive, less costly to the homeowners between the meter and, of course, the box, the shutoff valve. So we're recommending bringing this forward for approval based upon all the changes coming forward from the state and from the federal government.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman O'Brien, seconded by Alderman Went. Discussion? Mr. Schmidt, then Mr.
And this is just for education understanding. Would this be just for that residential side? I mean, I know that's part of the main decision of how we're doing to allow that for residential, but would we, the city, be installing this type at certain places as well?
Only if it was a city property that had a service line going from the box to into the building. Some park properties could qualify for this.
Mr. Nguyen?
When we did 15th, did the boring under there, was that with something like this, or was that copper, or?
The service lines were copper. The actual main was PVC, a different type of plastic.
And so and I guess that begs the question, are there other options other than just this? I know Moline has historically been very conservative on the materials we've used, and which oftentimes has resulted in higher costs with different things. And are there other options on top of this that are out there?
There are other options that we'll continue to look at, and we consider this to be a good incremental change at this time, and we're on the leading edge of this avalanche of service line replacements that we think this is a good move for this time.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yeah, like our neighboring communities, is this already?
I've informed them that we're going to make this move, and so they are taking a look at this option, but currently they require only copper.
Only copper, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 5, South Slope Clarifier Rehabilitation.
Mayor and Council, the Director of Utilities is requesting the consideration to retain professional services in the amount of $74,865 to Strand Associates to come up with a design to replace the existing clarifiers both at the South Slope wastewater treatment plant. One of them is in a state of disrepair and has failed. The other one is going into disrepair, and ultimately it will fail, and hopefully not before we can address this project. So we're recommending approval of retaining Strand and Associates for $74,685. I would also add that these clarifiers would be designed as a part of a permanent solution for the South Plant wastewater treatment plant. And it would be not spending money now to only come back later when the plant needs to be replaced in its entirety. So
to
these would
approve.
remain.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Nguyen, second by Alderman O'Brien. Any questions? Mr. Schmidt?
And I know this was not budgeted for things break. I just was hoping to get a little more clarity on. I know we have the fiscal impact line, but what is that in English? I guess
We're going to spend $75,000 out of WPC fund reserves, of which there are in excess of $10 million, and we're going to be bringing to you in the next meeting, if everything goes as planned, the final recommendations of the facilities planning study, and those the facilities planning conclusions are going to recommend some facilities improvements. These 2 clarifiers, which are our excess flow clarifiers, they're going to be needed in the spring here. Would have been needed to be replaced, and we're spending the money now rather than later.
Sure. No, I just appreciate your which fund it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moyer?
Thank you. One thing I didn't understand, you would be replacing those clarifiers before the spring or in the fall?
We would be designing them now. We'll be using them in the spring. One of them that we can still operate. The other one we'll use for hydraulic capacity, but likely it won't be until the summer or so until we get started on the work, the actual work. We're bringing a construction contract back to you for approval for that actual work.
Thank you.
I think, Tony, too, you should point out, I mean, the plant is reaching the end of its useful life, and I think you'll be bringing that whole topic back, and perhaps even in a roundtable discussion, because it'll be a significant investment of public funds.
Thank you. All right. If there's nothing further, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 6, water main extension variance.
Sometimes we get requests, Mayor and Council, to have a variance to the ordinance with respect to the extension of the water mains whenever there's a need for water. In this case, the cost to do that extension would be in excess of $50,000 to the property owner. they're looking for a variance to reduce that cost and agreeing alternatively to an agreement that would run with the property, that when the time came for the city to extend the main, that the main would be extended and that cost would be incurred by the then current property owner, whether it's this one or a future property owner is to be determined, in lieu of a cost of spending $5,000 to $7,000 to run a service line to the property today.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Waldron. Questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Number 7, WTP HVAC controls improvements.
Mayor and council, this next item is a resolution that would authorize staff to execute an attested professional service agreement with Train Building Services. We're looking at replacing a 20-year-old HVAC system at the water treatment plant at a cost not to exceed $97,195.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Bryan, seconded by Alderman Went. Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, I'm recusing myself from this item for a business conflict.
Thank you. Any questions, comments on that? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 8, Moline Drainage Assistance Program.
Tony, you want to take this one? I'm sorry, you brought, I see, I'm sorry, you brought.
Mr. Fair.
Hello. I've presented a couple times on this program. It's a cost-sharing program that we'd offer our residents to address drainage problems throughout our community. So, is there any questions?
I'll move to approve.
Oh yeah, and I think the approval was for $50,000.
Second.
Motion by Alderman
It's
Nguyen,
seed money.
Yeah.
seconded by
Basically,
sure.
Alderman Waldron. Discussion. Mr. Timian,
Um,
and then Mr. Wong.
With the $50,000 budget, and we're looking at a $5,000 cap per project, can you think of 10 projects off the top of your head that would qualify, that would be real big winners, that could just really help with the flow, or is this kind of like a fishing expedition? We're waiting to see what happens.
Sure. Well, I've been here about 6 months, and I've already got 4 good ones in my
Okay.
head. It was very. In my previous profession, I've worked with these programs, and they've been very successful. Depending on how hard we advertise it, I would expect a lot of interest immediately from concerned residents who have had these problems for a while. Hopefully, that answers. Yeah. I think it'll do well just based on my previous profession.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mr. Went.
Thank you, and Andy, thanks for working with us. We talked a little bit today. Stormwater is, of all of our enterprise and utilities, is the one that we have the least amount of reserves on. Is probably working on the razor's edge as much as anything else.
Yes.
And so $50,000 is a big chunk of that. And so I'm a proponent of that. I think 50,000 is the right number to use, but I have some concerns with starting at 75 and starting at 5,000.
Sure.
And the reason is, and we talked about this earlier, once you turn the dial all the way up, it's nearly impossible to throttle it back. And so when we've got a program like this, like was said, is new, I think it's best to come out of the gate at a 50-50 split at 3,000, see what the interest is. I want these to be the projects that are the most in need, that these people who right now are getting 0, and now all of a sudden they'll get 50% up to $3,000, so a lot more than they would have otherwise gotten, but they are putting 50% into it, that they're not just saying, hey, this is a bunch of free money, 75%, that's a return on investment. You may have some people that, I don't probably really need it, but if the city's going to pay for 75% of it, sure, let's do it. So I'd like to start there, and if we find that we do 5 projects and we haven't spent all the money, we could throttle it up. But if I have a feeling if we start advertising this, we're going to wind up working through that 50,000, and we'll be able to hit a lot more people before that. And so
Sure.
That's not an amendment yet. I will kind of want to hear what other people have to say.
Mr. Waldron.
Andy, your work in your other communities, I know it's hard to ballpark, but what do you see the general cost for one, like the 4 you have in the queue, what is the general cost of those? Whether it's 3, 5, 7?
Between 3 and 5, I think, for most of them. One of them would definitely hit the threshold, the 5,000 threshold. I believe the project would be pretty extensive, but a couple of them are probably around 3 to 4,000, probably. The ones that I've seen so far, and I haven't been in all the ravines yet, but I'm sure there are some. I'd get some calls from some doozies. You wouldn't get any staff resistance if you wanted to move this to a 50-50 for now. The program's designed to be flexible, and we can make changes at any point. We just want to make sure we have something to help out the community.
Question?
Yes.
No, I just want to on it. And I want to thank you also. I was the one who brought this up in the budget hearings, and I know staff has put a lot of time into this to see what we can do, and I very much appreciate all your efforts. This is infinitely better than us picking and choosing working on private property. We had one budget in there for $100,000 that we were going to work on private property. This is an infinitely better program, whether it's 50-50 or 75-25, whatever it winds up. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Absolutely. Save a lot of staff time that way too.
I have a quick question for you. So you mentioned your professional experience. With cost sharing programs like this at the 50-50 level versus the 75-25, what's the community's response usually? Do they balk at the 50-50?
So I work for Rock Island, and in their program, they have a very similar program, and they have a 75-25%. So we would pay 75% of the cost up to 3,000. So this is 75 up to 5,000, and that $3,000 was set back in 2003. So the $5,000 was just kind of an inflation, just a kind of a guess of what the inflation would be at this point.
So to the use or to the popularity of it is what I'm getting.
Yes, so when I tell people, when I get usually a very distressing call about a storm that came through and their creeks getting close to their house or washing away a shed or something, when I said we have a program for 75%, they like 75% program was very helpful to them.
So that's what your experience is.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. As well, I mean, Bettendorf and Davenport both have a 50-50 program with zero cap. Ours, we're proposing a $5,000 cap.
Okay.
I'm sure anything would be appreciated.
That's helpful information. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Schmidt, then Mr. Went, and then Mr. Who's pointing? I'm not
They
sure who
all
was
are.
first over here.
What?
Mr. Schmidt.
So first, I just wanted to clarify, in answering Alderman Waldron's question, it was, you expect those projects to be between $3,000 to $5,000 total? Like, all
Yes.
in, or that would be the city commitment on top of the
Good.
project?
Yeah, about maybe total, around 5,000 total. Just the ones I've seen though. Like I've had a couple concerned calls and I haven't been able to do anything for them, but I have said we're working on a program. Keep your eye out. And those programs, one of them is significant. One of them might be closer to $8,000 or $9,000. And so I'm sorry to be so vague on this. It kind of depends if somebody just wants to hydro seed or somebody really wants to armor their bank and put down some baskets and stuff. So it could get as elaborate as they want. But that's kind of the good thing. We do have a cap, and as long as it will reduce the erosion and keep our creeks and the river cleaner, that's kind of what the goal of the program is. And I guess in my previous life, I saw them as cheap as $1,000, and a gentleman put in $30,000 and only got a $3,000 reimbursement, but he was happy for that too. So,
And there's also language that talked about they may only be paid once for a single project on the property.
oh, okay.
So would that mean if a second incident happened, perhaps a few years later, related to a different problem, that would be eligible to come back? Or?
Well, yeah, no. So the goal would be to you have a one shot at this project. We wouldn't want to have somebody who has a long line of creek, a little bit here. We're kind of not nickel and diming us, but a little bit every year. We'd like to have them do this one time. If something came through and destroyed that project, I have yet to run across that. I'll be honest. Even in my previous profession, usually if they're installing it, I recommend overbuilding the heck out of that project because the storms that we get are pretty torrential. So we say one time just to kind of cover our grounds or cover us so we're not out there every other year for a little bit of erosion here and here and here. We give them one shot.
It would be rare that a property would have two separate issues.
Rare, but I have seen properties with multiple creeks that converge well on their property.
And that's what I was wondering about in that two pieces or?
Yeah, and under those circumstances, if you had two different drainage or watersheds, I'm sure we'd be happy to work with them if there was funding. We
it's
don't want
appropriate.
we don't want funding at the end of the year. We want to spend this and help out. But that's a good point. I have seen that, and we have made exceptions, at least in my previous career.
And I have just one comment, and then I'll be done. I promise.
Mr.
The I think there is some sense, especially knowing kind of that estimation of where we are with project size. If we want to move a cap lower, I think that could make sense. Allow us to help more people. We can always adjust that. That does make sense. I would like to see it stay at 75% match. I think that provides a higher level of service, especially to people who maybe can't afford to do these projects otherwise. And a lot of properties it gets on that. And are the people who could afford it? Yes, sure. But I also think it'll encourage people to say, hey, I'm going to step out because it's 75%. And we know when they make these improvements, that's going to improve to the whole system. So I just think that match level makes sense to me as kind of incenting people. But if we pull back a little on our max, that would be one way to kind of keep that back too.
We would also encourage adjacent properties that share a creek. We will give every property their own reimbursement. So we can cover a lot of ground that way as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Was there, okay, so Mr.
Yep.
Timian first.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would actually, I like the percentages and cap as they are, mostly because by your description, all of the, not all, but the vast majority of the projects are well below that cap, but we're still allowing for the possibility of a large project. And we definitely want to encourage those large ones to be done because it doesn't just impact their property, but neighboring properties. And there's erosion factors. And I think the state of the economy is a factor in this too, and we want to encourage usage of the program. So, I mean, for those reasons and others, I think leaving the numbers as they are is a good first start.
Mr. White.
And I appreciate it, and I don't disagree with that as a whole, but we've never done this program. We don't know what the usage is. The usage could be, everybody does it at 50-50, and we go through all of this and we're able to extend it further and do more in the city because of that. I mean, my concern with 75 versus 50-50 is just, as Andy said, it's up to them. I mean, if the city's paying for 75% of it, they may go a little bit more hog wild on what they're doing, put in given baskets, and do things that, like, because hey, it's not much of my money, it's a lot of the city's money that's being put into this. And so that's where I think going to 50-50 to start. If we don't have interest, or if we've got situations where people can't pay, it certainly is stuff that we could come back to and address. But right now we have no idea how much of this $50,000. I mean, we've got these 4 projects, but that's because they're getting zero now. And so I think I'd like to, and I'll make this motion. I'd make the motion to reduce it from 75 to 50 split up.
What's your cap? Are you just going with
Let's start with that, and then we'll talk about the cap next.
Is there a second?
second?
Second by Alderman Waldron.
I just have one other, it's just a statement, Your Honor.
Okay.
I think you're right. I think once this thing opens up, you're gonna have a lot of demand, because
Mhm.
that's an issue here. And if you have a rainy spring, speaking as a guy who spent about 15 grand on a retaining wall last summer, you're gonna have a lot of demand. It's water is other communities are starving for water, but we aren't here. We don't have a problem with that. We got too much of it sometimes.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second on making it a 50-50 cost sharing plan. Any further discussion? Mr. Wen?
Yeah, and the biggest is because I don't think we know this will stretch it further. I think we'll be able to help more people. And if we wind up helping all the ones that will do it at 50-50 and then it dries up, then we can crank it up or adjust things differently down the road.
Thank you, Mr. Timian.
Thank you, Your Honor. There is an application process, and
Yes.
and you are able to choose the most impactful and least wasteful projects. So if someone does go hog wild, as to put it, on their plans, you could come back and say, that's a bit much. We're going to go for this, guys.
Yeah, that's correct. We would only reimburse on pieces of that project that were in line with the program initiative to reduce erosion or to do, fix their property.
Thank you.
If they wanted landscape, we've had questions about outcrops and boulders and landscaping and the grasses kind of, if they're not pertaining to the project, we're not going, just because you have a landscaper out there, doesn't mean you can kind of go nuts like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Moyer?
Thank you. And I assume if this is a popular program, then we would renew it again for next year and
I
potentially
would
the year
hope
after.
so,
And so
yeah.
forth.
It's been in place in Rock Island since 2003, I believe. And funding the cap and the percentage has stayed the same, but funding has fluctuated depending on lean times or good times. So that's something that could be adjusted as well.
Mr. Wynn?
Yeah, and just as a reminder, as he said, I mean, Bettendorf's at 50%, Davenport's at 50%, Scott County's at 50%, Cedar Rapids is at 50%. Rock Island's at 75. There's different caps.
Small
Some of
cap,
them
yeah.
don't have caps and stuff like that. But there seems to be programs out there that work at 50%, and people are utilizing them and working through it. I think that's the starting point. And we maybe 3 months from now come back and, hey, we got to throttle this up. But my guess is exactly what Alderman O'Brien had said is at 50%, these people are going from no help to help, and they're going to do it, and we'll be able to help a lot more people this way.
Okay, thank you. All right, yes, Mr. Schmidt?
I still have my concern that for homeowners who can't afford it, I think that 50% is just not enough. I think the places we can make the biggest difference, 75% will make that. And for people who have that financial ability to pay, they're going to get the big project they want. And they're still only going to get it. And I think bringing down the cap is the way to manage costs. I don't think adjusting the percentage is the way to do that. I just think bringing down the cap penalizes our poorest families and the families that need the most help in Moline. That's just my
Thank you.
perspective.
All right, Harry, no other discussion? Take a vote on this amendment. All in favor?
Aye.
I will do a roll call, thank you. Roll call, please.
Alderman Macias,
Nay.
Went,
Aye.
Timian,
Nay.
Moyer,
Nay.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Nay.
Williams,
Aye.
4 ayes, 4 nays.
You guys. You just want it, don't you? Nay.
That motion fails.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to bring the cap, the amount paid down to $3,000.
Second that.
All right, motion by Alderman Waldron, seconded by Alderman Went. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Macias,
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Timian,
Nay.
Moyer,
Nay.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
6 ayes, 2 nays.
Okay, the cap is to 3,000. All right. Those were amendments. Now we have to go back to the original motion. Any further discussion on the original motion? The program. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen. Number 9, Public Works Internship IGA.
As you will recall, Mayor and Council, at the last meeting, this was presented informationally to you. It's been prepared, of course, by both our Human Resource Director, Leah Miller, alongside the Mayor, with our Corporation Counsel, Margaret Kampoulis, and in conjunction with the efforts of the Moline Coal Valley School District Superintendent and her staff. And we're recommending approval of the resolution for the mayor and city clerk to execute and test the IGA, which would establish this program to have an internship between the city of Moline, its utility, public works, and engineering departments, as well as it's basically a summer internship program. We're recommending approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Waldron, seconded by Alderman Timian. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. I do believe we have an other this evening. Mr. Lodi, are you kicking that off?
So
Mayor and Council, we have I've put some information at your chairs there. We have an ongoing problem we've been dealing with that staff's calling the PAR instrument project. We have a flooding issue in the corridor north of 4th Avenue, between the 4th Avenue and the railroad tracks, and in about the 50th Street area, where under certain conditions, when the river level is in flood stage and we get localized heavy rains, that area tends to flood, and we don't have the pumping capacity to move the water. And so we've, 3 or 4 years ago, we engaged with IMEG, local engineer, to study that area. They came up with some findings which are at your in the packet that I provided for you. We applied for FEMA funds to try and fund that project, but we didn't qualify because the solution that we presented didn't meet the 100-year rain event. So the mayor has made us aware of a grant opportunity that we think really fits this project well. It's a project that was, or an alternative that was brought to the mayor's attention through Congresswoman Bustos' office. And so,
can I interrupt you?
Yes.
And also, just for your knowledge, the person we appointed tonight to revolving loan fund, Craig Loken, he also sent that to me. That was his initial outreach. So we got it from a public
correct.
resident who's just interested in the city, and from our congressional representative.
So this grant program is called RAISE Grants. It's connected to President Biden's infrastructure program. It's more geared towards transportation, but just this last year they attached an ecological component to it. So we believe that we can change the scope of this project to, one, increase the pumping capacity so that we can meet that 100-year flood or 100-year rain event, and then also develop some detention with an ecological or an aquatic component to it in that corridor there. So we'd like to get some additional engineering services from IMEG to prepare the necessary documents to apply for that grant. We would come back to you at a later time when we actually are planning to make the application because there is a match. But as of now, we're asking for staff authorization up to $25,000 in an engineering support agreement with IMEG, pending Bob's approval. Staff recommends that we proceed with this.
Move to approve.
Second,
Motion by Alderman Wentz, second by Alderman Waldron.
Your Honor.
Discussion. Yes, I got it. Who was first? You said Your Honor, so here we go, Mr. Waldron.
Tony, where do you intend to come up with the $25,000 to fund this?
We, City Council, authorized $1 million from ARPA funds for flood mitigation efforts, and I recommend that we take that $25,000 out of that $1 million allocation.
Thank you.
Mr. Went and then Mr. Timmy.
That was exactly my recommendation, so
Okay.
I
Yes.
can say.
Yeah. So I think April 14th is the cutoff. Any concern on timing? Do you need anything else to make sure you hit that date?
My only question is do we need to do something more to get this fully approved tonight in the council meeting?
The spending authority,
Yes.
but I
Well,
don't
what's
believe
Bob's?
so. That's what your motion is to approve up to 25,000 spending for
Okay.
an engineering.
So it's,
Right,
Study.
because we still need to bring the grant application back
Right.
okay.
because of the cost that we're not 100% certain of yet. We know we have $1 million set aside in ARPA dollars specifically for this area of Illinois 92 to allow that company to grow, which, you know, they did phone actually last week, and I haven't talked to them since Tony and I met with the gentleman months and months ago, probably 6 months ago. And he's excited to see that we're interested in working with him to help address this problem so that he can grow his business at that location, which would really be great for job creation, job retention, and, you know, new growth and development in that corridor is obviously it's needed, so. you know, we're-
So first step is this for the engineering, second step is the application for the raise grant, and we can just certainly prioritize that in the March meetings, and maybe one of those situations where we have to see it on 2 meeting agendas, situation to deal with the April 14th deadline. Mr. Moyer and then Mr. O'Brien.
So I kind of had a related question. Does this affect the storm drainage that's behind par as well? I did a cleanup with the East End group I think it was last spring. And as you get down to the end there, behind par, there's a bit of like a washout that goes down to the river. And I know this is part of the drainage problem. Does this get that all fixed up too, or?
There will be some improvements along that corridor to split the one watershed into 2. And yes, so that area would be redeveloped or improved.
Excellent, thank you.
So other than PAR, who else is affected by this? I mean, does it affect all of those other businesses that are down
Maybe
there?
like Jacobs. And,
It's a large, there's a large corridor, but the PAR is by far the one property owner that has come to us the most.
And have you discussed this with the other businesses down there, and are they on?
We haven't had any dialogue with any of the other. The one other note, Your Honor, is that we may end up getting some grant services support, but we expect the cost related to that to be within the staff's approval level.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Mr. Wood?
well, just ask the questions. It's, I guess, tangential to this. There had been some talk about the redevelopment of that I-92 corridor and possibly putting some kind of TIF down in that area.
It's possible.
Has there been any further discussions regarding that? Because, I mean, if we're going to be doing a number of improvements down there, could be TIF eligible. There could be some other things that could really enhance. I mean, you talk about like the old Fear Factory building, Jacobs area down there. I mean, there's quite a bit of area down there that could be redeveloped, especially if they're going to be redoing 92 along that corridor.
Mr. O'Brien and I were in a meeting and looked up the date and the strategic plan on the I-92 redevelopment. It's 2023, but it's not set in stone necessarily, so it would be up to you and staff to come back with a discussion on the TIF eligibility.
Yeah, I fully appreciate what you're saying, Alderman. Obviously, if time was in our favor and there wasn't a deadline on this grant, I
don't think you should hold this up at all.
Yeah, not on this opportunity, but looking forward in the future, I think some form of incentive needs to be created, whether it's TIF or some other form. Not knowing what's going to happen with the TIF laws, of course, they change or they don't change, as we know. But we do need to work with Renew Moline. I mean, this corridor is part of what they're responsible for, and yet it's the corridor that that has been left for us to work on next. So as we move forward, not only with the I-74 corridor, one of the things we want to talk about are TIF opportunities, and it's not just the existing 13 TIFs that were created, the one that's retiring, but also what to do with the I-74 corridor. Should that be TIF? Should it not be? Should 13 be grown? Should it be left the way it is? Those discussions need to happen, and I know we're beginning to have that dialogue now. And then as a part of that dialogue, of course, there's the whole issue with 92, and what do we do to try and create something there that's exciting. I mean, East Moline's corridor has taken a change. It's significantly different than it was when I was working over there. I don't recognize it, actually. And I would like us to take a hard look at that, even bring consultants on to start doing analysis, because there's a lot of property there, and a lot of it, I don't want to say is it's not abandoned or it's vacant, but it's just, it might be vacant, no longer operational.
Right.
So
underutilized.
There's a lot to that corridor to study.
Okay, so more
sounds
to
a
come
great
on
job
that.
for the new director.
And I was not suggesting that we hold off on this, but if we get this, I mean, it won't be until the following year, and so I'm just trying to set the table so that maybe by that time when we do the match, there
Got
could
it.
be some
It's possible.
I think it starts with IDOT fixing the road, because that road is, I mean,
You know, when you drive down that road, you just can't drive on that right lane because people fight to stay out of that right lane, and they'll
Yeah.
cut you off and force you
All
to
right.
have to be on the inside
Well,
lane.
let's come
For
back
sure.
to this initial motion. So I think we're ready to take a vote on this.
it's pretty crunchy.
So this is to authorize staff to go up to 25,000 for an engineering study with IMEG, correct? With IMEG specifically, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Informational, Mr. Vitas, the 2022 to 24 strategic action plan and dashboard, the much awaited document.
Well, I for one, and I know the staff for two, are thrilled to be able to provide the council and the mayor with the 2022-2024 action plan dashboard, or work plan, or business plan, depending upon what you would like to call it. We refer to it as our action plan, and it is a direct outgrowth of the adoption of the budget for 2022 through 2024, as well as an outgrowth of the strategic plan for that same time period, which this council also adopted with citizen and community engagement at the very beginning. So as you go through the plan, I tried to give you kind of just a brief synopsis, of course, in the cover memo. I could go on ad nauseum and write all kind of things, but you know, this basically covers exactly what it is we need to be focused on. The plan is more, it's more than just a plan to provide for transparency, which it does, or accountability, which it does. It's a plan that gives us the ability to report more frequently on a quarterly basis. How are we doing performance-wise with those metrics? You know, what benchmarks are we reaching? What milestones are we reaching as we bring all of these projects to life? Obviously, as you look through the plan, you can see that it does follow very nicely along with your strategic plan and all the goals and all the different funds that are allocated to it. And some of them, you can see the light turned green because those projects, some of them actually started in 21 and will continue into 22 and be concluded. Some of them are programs that we started anew and they will continue, and we'll be reporting on those, on progress on those. And there are some projects, of course, because of just the sheer volume of work we have in front of us, that there are still, the red light is on. We haven't turned it to green yet, but they will be going green. Eventually they all go green. Eventually they all go blue, meaning that they've been successfully completed. I can tell you there are no blue dots anywhere in this plan right now. There are those who wanted blue, they didn't get blue, but they got green. There was some negotiations that went on with the staff. Nothing is blue until I get to that point with them. So the plan itself, again, follows our comprehensive plan to 3 pillars, which, you know, of course, are the quality of place, the economy that's most critical, and our infrastructure, which is the single most critical issue brought forward by our residents. This document is a living document. It's a document that we will work, you know, as a staff when I meet with department managers. This is kind of a guiding discussion. Where are we on the projects? It's always being tracked. When the assistant city administrator down the road is hired, this will be one of their key responsibilities is to ensure that this thing is being monitored and that the performance is taking place. Beyond that, it's meant to be a tool to provide information to our citizens, especially them, you know, the people who pay the bills, the taxpayers, the businesses that are here, the other key stakeholders who invest here. You know, it gives them a clear understanding, a clear picture of what is important to Moline and what should be important to them if they were looking to live here, work here, play here, or invest here. So it's another great tool. It's a tool that most local governments don't have. This is not something that you would normally see in my experience in the years I've been involved in my prior professional life. So if there are questions about it, I'm more than happy to sit down with each and every one of you over the next week or 2 or 3 weeks, whatever is more convenient. If you have questions, by all means, I'm happy to answer those questions tonight or also make arrangements to meet with you to go over this action plan. The action plan itself, like I said, every time we amend the strategic plan, the plan will change. Every time you adopt the budget, the plan changes and it gets renewed annually, along with your annual budget publication that will be coming out in about a week.
Great, thank you very much.
So I thank you for your patience in letting us get this to you in early February.
It's very much appreciated. I personally appreciate the alignment of all of these documents. I think that that's helpful for the organization to keep track. Appreciate your work and the staff.
Thank you, Mayor.
Questions? Thank you. All right, hearing none. Any further public comment? No, hearing none. We'll close out that meeting and move to our regular council meeting. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Macias, do you have an invocation?
No, I don't, Your
All
Honor.
right, roll call, please.
Alderman Williams,
Present.
Macias,
Present.
Went,
Present.
Timian,
Present.
Moyer,
Present.
O'Brien,
Present.
Waldron,
Present.
Schmidt.
Present.
Your Honor, I request approval of Committee of the Whole, Council and Executive Session meeting minutes of February 1st, 2022, and council meeting minutes of February 8th, 2022. Resolutions. Council Bill 1024-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and chief of police to execute an equitable sharing agreement and certification between the federal government and the Moline Police Department, setting forth the requirements for participation in the equitable sharing program and certifying all receipts and expenditures of federal forfeiture funds, property, and interest during the last fiscal year. Council Bill 1025-2022, a resolution amending the City of Moline Community Development Block Grant Policies and Procedures Manual. Council Bill 1026-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an agreement with Express Services Incorporated, doing business as Express Employment Professionals, to provide administrative services to fulfill temporary and seasonal staffing needs of city departments, and also provide the insurance and liability coverage requested for a one-year period commencing March 1st, 2022. Council Bill 1027-2022, resolution authorizing the information technology manager to purchase 7 Panasonic Toughbooks from CDS Office Technologies in the amount of $23,991.
Your Honor, I propose the approval of consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Alderman O'Brien, seconded by Alderman Went. Roll call, please.
Alderman Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
Moyer.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays, and that motion passes. Second reading ordinances. Council Bill 4001-2022, special ordinance granting a permanent waiver to 28-3200A and Section 35-4218 of the Moline Code of Ordinances, and $9,984 payment into the sidewalk fund in lieu of construction of sidewalk along 10th Avenue for property located at 1002 27th Street, Moline.
Motion to approve 40012022.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Timian, seconded by Alderman Moyer. Discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Alderman Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
Moyer.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays. And that motion passes. And that's all I have this evening, Your Honor.
Thank you. And we will be, these two items under resolutions have been pulled, so we move to miscellaneous business. I will let you know, I'm always happy to have conversation during miscellaneous. I just want you to know we have 6 items in executive session tonight. So just keep that in mind as we go through miscellaneous. Mr. Williams,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Macias,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Went,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Timian,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Moyer,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. O'Brien.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Nothing, Your Honor.
All right, I just have one tiny thing. Next weekend, not this weekend, the coming weekend on the 26th. It's the 2022 Black Business Expo and Health Fair hosted by the QC Empowerment Network. It's from 1 to 5 p.m. in South Park Mall. And I think, given that this is Black History Month and we haven't made a declaration or a proclamation for that, I think it'd be great if we checked out what that business activity was being represented at that event. So I encourage you to go. That's all I have. There's no more public comments, so we need an executive session.
Your Honor, I make a motion that the council convene an executive session for the purpose of discussion pending probable or imminent litigation, 5 ILCS 120/2C11, review of executive session minutes, 5 ILCS 120/2C21, and appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, 5 ILCS 120/2C1.
And
Second.
we have one more, hey, 1 second, we have one more in addition.
If you would add to that motion, for the purpose of, or I should say, under 120 ILCS/2C, paren T3, words.
I can't hear that.
I'm sorry.
Please just repeat what you said.
So for the exception under 120 ILCS/2, parentheses, paren
23.
Repeat what she just said.
Nope. What she said.
Okay.
There you go.
We'll take that.
Yeah.
We'll
Is
take
there a
that.
description? I'm sorry, Margaret, is there a
So
description?
that is the operation by a municipality of a municipal utility.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone understand the 3 reasons we're going into closed session. Thank you. Roll call, please.
I'm sorry, who was the second on that?
Second.
There we go, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Alderman Macias?
Present.
No, aye.
Sorry.
It's Alderman.
Here.
Alderman Meyer.
Aye.
Timian?
Aye.
Moyer?
Congressman, you can just vote president.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Waldron?
Aye.
Schmidt?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
Thank you. Mr. Rowland,